It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when Emma's day took an unexpected turn. The house was peaceful, the kind of calm that came after a long morning of chores and emails. She was sitting at her desk, sorting through paperwork, when she heard a car stop outside. Her husband, Mark, was still at work, so she assumed it was a delivery. But when she peeked through the window, her heart lifted in mild surprise. It was Mark's brother, Adam. Adam rarely visited without a reason. He lived in the same town but stayed busy with his job and his quiet private life. Emma opened the door with a warm smile. "Adam, what a surprise. Come in." He smiled back, a bit hesitant, like he wasn't sure he should be there. "Hey, Emma, I was just driving by and thought I'd stop for a bit." "Hope it's okay." "Course," she said, stepping aside. "You're always welcome." They walked into the living room, the afternoon sun spilling through the curtains. Emma offered him coffee, but he declined, saying softly, "Actually, can we talk for a minute? Maybe somewhere private." His tone was calm, polite, but different, serious. It wasn't his usual easygoing manner. Emma frowned slightly, trying to guess what it was about. "Sure," she said, leading him toward the office at the end of the hallway. It was the quietest room in the house. Once they entered, Adam looked around the bookshelves, the desk, the framed photo of Mark and Emma smiling on vacation. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Sit, what's going on?" But before sitting, Adam did something unexpected. He walked to the door and gently pushed it closed. The soft click of the latch made Emma's heartbeat quicken just a little. She wasn't afraid, just caught off guard. She gave him a curious look. "Okay, now you're making this sound serious." Adam finally sat, leaning forward, hands clasped loosely. "It is," he said quietly. His expression wasn't angry or nervous, just honest. "I've been meaning to talk to you for a while, but I didn't know how." Emma folded her hands, patient and kind. "Adam, you can talk to me about anything." "What's wrong?" He took a deep breath and let it out slowly. "Nothing's wrong. Not exactly. It's just something I've been keeping to myself. And I think it's time I say it." Emma nodded for him to continue, her mind already racing through possibilities, maybe a family issue, maybe something about Mark. But then Adam said something that made her still completely. "It's about you." Emma blinked, confused. "Me? What do you mean?" He looked straight at her, and for a moment, his voice almost faltered. "I know this will sound strange, and maybe I shouldn't be saying it, but I've been carrying this for a long time. I care about you. More than I should." The air in the room changed instantly. Emma stared at him, her lips parting slightly. For a moment, she thought she'd misheard him. "Adam, what?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking down, embarrassed. "You've always been kind to me. Even before you and Mark got married, you treated me like I mattered. You listen. You ask how I'm doing. I guess over time, it just became. More than that." Emma sat back, stunned. The words hung between them, heavy and fragile. "Adam, you're Mark's brother," she said quietly. "I know," he said quickly. "I know how it sounds. That's why I never said anything before. I would never want to hurt either of you. I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I needed to be honest at least once." She swallowed hard, her mind spinning. There was no anger, only disbelief and an ache of discomfort. "Adam, you shouldn't have said that," she said gently. "This isn't fair to anyone." He nodded, his voice low. "You're right. I just couldn't keep lying to myself. I'm not asking for anything, Emma. I just wanted you to know." Silence filled the room again. The ticking clock suddenly felt loud. Emma looked away, her eyes landing on the photo on the shelf. Her and Mark laughing at the beach. Everything about this moment felt unreal. "Adam," she said after a moment, her voice calm but firm. "I appreciate your honesty. Really, I do. But this can't happen, not even as a thought. Your family." "I know," he whispered. "And that's why I'll never say it again. I promise. I just needed to say it once." He stood slowly, clearly embarrassed but relieved. Emma stayed seated, still processing everything. She didn't know whether to comfort him or to ask him to leave immediately. Before she could decide, the sound of a car pulling up outside broke the silence. Mark was home. Adam's eyes widened slightly, and he gave a weak smile. "I should go." Emma stood, still stunned. "Adam." He looked at her one last time, not with regret, but with quiet understanding. "Don't worry. I won't ever bring it up again. I just wanted you to know that someone sees how much you do for everyone. You deserve to be appreciated." Her chest tightened at that, not because of the words themselves, but because of the sincerity in his tone. Then he turned and walked out, his footsteps fading down the hall. Emma followed him slowly to the doorway, where Mark's voice called cheerfully, "Hey, Adam, didn't expect to see you here." Adam smiled, pretending nothing had happened. "Just stopped by to say hi. I was leaving anyway." Mark clapped his brother on the shoulder. "Good to see you, man. We'll catch up soon." Adam nodded and walked out the front door, leaving Emma standing there, her pulse still unsteady. Mark turned to her, oblivious. "Everything okay?" She forced a small smile. "Yeah, he just came to drop something off." Mark nodded, tossing his keys onto the counter. "All right, I'm starving. You want to order dinner?" Emma nodded automatically, but her thoughts were far away. She watched Adam's car disappear down the road through the window. That night, after dinner, Mark went to bed early. Emma sat alone in the office, staring at the closed door. The room still felt heavy with unspoken words. Adam's confession played over and over in her mind, not the feelings, but the line that stuck like an echo. "Someone sees you." She hadn't realized how much those words meant until now. For months she had felt unseen, caught between her work, her marriage, and her quiet loneliness. Mark loved her, yes, but life had become routine. Hearing that someone noticed, even if it came from the wrong person, had stirred something inside her, not desire, but awareness. Emma pressed her palms together and whispered softly to herself, "This changes nothing." But deep down, she knew things were already different. Adam's words couldn't be unsaid. And while she had no intention of ever crossing that line, the truth lingered in her heart that someone had looked at her and seen more than she realized she was showing. When she finally turned off the light and closed the office door for the night, she caught her reflection in the glass. There was no guilt in her eyes, only confusion and an ache she didn't fully understand. Tomorrow would be normal again, she told herself. Tomorrow, she'd pretend the conversation never happened. But as she lay in bed beside Mark, listening to his even breathing, her mind replayed the moment the door had closed, the quiet room, the serious tone. The look in Adam's eyes. Something had shifted that afternoon. And no matter how hard she tried, Emma knew the world around her, her marriage, her peace. Her sense of balance would never feel quite the same again. The morning after Adam's unexpected visit, Emma woke earlier than usual. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that carried thoughts she didn't want to face. Sunlight streamed through the curtains, touching the floor like a soft reminder of reality. She moved through her morning routine, coffee, toast, reading the news, but her mind was far away. Across the table, Mark looked cheerful, completely unaware of what had happened in that very office yesterday. He talked about a project at work, how his boss wanted him to take on new responsibilities. Emma smiled, nodded, responded where she should, but every word felt distant. Her mind replayed Adam's expression, the sincerity in his eyes when he'd said, "You deserve to be appreciated." She didn't want to think about it, but the memory wouldn't let her go. Not because of the words themselves, but because of how they made her feel seen. It had been so long since anyone looked at her that way, with such unfiltered honesty. Mark loved her, she knew that, but life had settled into patterns. Meals, chores, short talks before bed. Affection had turned into routine. As she washed the dishes, she wondered if maybe Adam had misread her kindness. She'd always been supportive toward him, especially after his breakup years ago. Maybe he'd confused gratitude with affection. That thought comforted her. It gave reason to something that had felt so sudden that afternoon. She got a message on her phone. It was Adam. "Hey Emma, I just wanted to say I'm sorry if I made things awkward yesterday. I didn't mean to cause any trouble." Emma stared at the message for a long time. She could have ignored it, but that felt cruel. She typed carefully. "It's okay, Adam. Let's just forget about it and move on. No harm done." His reply came seconds later. "Thanks. I appreciate that. You've always been understanding." She didn't reply after that, but as she set her phone down, she couldn't ignore the mix of relief and unease washing over her. The following days returned to normal, at least on the surface. Mark went to work, came home late, and spent his evenings half absorbed in his laptop or TV. Emma busied herself with errands, her small home business, and occasional visits with neighbors. Yet, deep down, there was a subtle shift. She caught herself thinking about Adam more than she should, not in the way he had meant, but with curiosity. What made him feel that alone? How long had he been holding that in? On Friday, Mark invited Adam and a few friends over for dinner. The moment he mentioned it, Emma froze for a second. "Oh," she said lightly. "That's nice." That evening, as she prepared the meal, she kept her emotions steady. She wouldn't let anything feel different. When Adam arrived, his usual calm self returned. He greeted her politely, no tension in his tone, no trace of what he'd confessed days before. He even brought a bottle of wine, joking, "Peace offering." Emma smiled, a genuine one this time. "You're forgiven," she said quietly. Throughout dinner, the atmosphere was lively. Mark laughed with his brother, unaware of any hidden history between them. Emma watched the two of them, feeling an ache she couldn't name. The brothers had always been close, yet now, every shared laugh between them made Emma feel like she was sitting on the edge of something fragile. Later, when everyone had left and the house was quiet again, Mark turned to her. "See? That wasn't so bad. Adam's doing better these days. He seems more at peace." Emma nodded, her throat tightening slightly. "Yeah, he does." But that night, when she lay awake beside Mark, she couldn't shake the way Adam's eyes had briefly met hers across the dinner table, calm, respectful, but undeniably aware. There was understanding in that glance, like a silent agreement to keep what had happened buried forever. A week passed. Life moved on, but Emma's mind didn't. She tried focusing on her work. But small things kept reminding her of that moment in the office. The sound of the door closing, the steady tone in Adam's voice. It wasn't attraction she felt, but confusion. It was the realization that someone had noticed her loneliness before she had admitted it to herself. One afternoon, Mark forgot his lunch at home. Emma decided to drive it to his office. She hadn't been there in months, and the visit gave her a small sense of purpose. When she arrived, she noticed Adam's truck parked outside the same building. She smiled to herself. Maybe they were meeting for work. But as she was about to enter, Adam came out. Their eyes met across the parking lot, both equally surprised. "Emma," he said softly, walking over. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Mark forgot his lunch," she said, holding up the bag. "I was just dropping it off." He nodded, awkward but kind. "He's inside. They're having a meeting." They stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say. Finally, Adam broke the silence. "I meant what I said before about not bringing it up again. I hope you know I meant that." "I do," she said, her voice gentle. "And I appreciate it." He smiled, faint but genuine. "Good. You're one of the few people I can be honest with, Emma. I don't want that to change." Her heart ached a little. "It doesn't have to," she said softly. "We just have to be careful." He nodded, and for a brief second, the air between them felt heavy again, not with forbidden feelings, but with something deeper, empathy, maybe even shared loneliness. Before either could say more, Mark came out of the building, waving cheerfully. "Hey, what are you two doing out here?" Adam quickly smiled. "Just ran into each other." "I was heading out." Mark grinned. "Small world, huh?" Emma handed Mark his lunch and forced a light tone. "You'd forget your head if it wasn't attached." They all laughed. But when Adam waved goodbye and walked to his truck, Emma caught the faintest glance from him, respectful, calm, but filled with unspoken gratitude. That night, Emma couldn't sleep again. She replayed the moment in the parking lot, wondering why it lingered in her thoughts. There had been nothing inappropriate, nothing romantic, yet something about it felt powerful. It was like two people standing on opposite sides of a boundary they both respected but silently acknowledged existed. The next day, Mark mentioned casually, "Adam's been talking about moving away, maybe to Seattle. He says he needs a change." Emma froze, surprised by the sudden news. "Really? Did he say why?" Mark shrugged. "Said he wants to start fresh. I think he's just tired of this place." Emma nodded, pretending to agree. But inside, her heart felt oddly heavy. Adam leaving would be the right thing. She knew that it would erase any trace of awkwardness between them. Yet she couldn't ignore the faint sadness she felt at the thought of him being gone. Over the next few days, she thought often about how one moment could change everything, a closed door, a few words, and suddenly life felt different. She didn't want to imagine anything beyond what was real. But she couldn't deny that Adam's presence had stirred something in her. A reminder of how human connection could surprise her, even in the most unexpected ways. That night, she wrote in her journal for the first time in months. Her handwriting trembled as she wrote, "Sometimes it's not love or desire that shakes your heart. It's simply being seen, truly seen by someone who isn't supposed to look that closely." Then she closed the journal and turned off the light, determined to protect the fragile peace that still existed in her home. The day Adam left town came faster than anyone expected. Mark had mentioned it casually a few times, but Emma didn't realize it was happening so soon. It was a Tuesday morning, quiet, gray, the kind of day that made everything feel slower. Mark went to help Adam load his car while Emma stayed home, pretending to tidy up. But truthfully, she didn't want to say goodbye. When Mark returned, he seemed tired but upbeat. "Adam's gone," he said, dropping his keys on the table. "He'll call when he gets there." Emma nodded, forcing a smile. That's good for him. A new start. But the words caught in her throat. She turned away quickly, pretending to check something on the counter. Mark didn't notice. He went on talking about traffic, about how Adam seemed lighter as he drove off. That night, Emma found an envelope tucked under her doormat when she went to lock the front door. Her heart stopped when she saw her name written in Adam's neat handwriting. She hesitated, looking around as if someone might be watching, then slowly opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was steady but emotional. "Emma, I didn't want to leave without saying goodbye, but I knew it would make things harder. You've always treated me with kindness more than I deserved sometimes. I hope you know how much that meant to me. I'm not running away because of what happened. I'm leaving because I need space to rebuild myself. I can't stay close to something that makes me feel so much and pretend it means nothing. You once told me people come into our lives to teach us something. You were right. You reminded me that care doesn't always have to turn into love. Sometimes it's just understanding. I'll always be grateful for that. Please don't feel guilty or confused. You didn't do anything wrong. Tell Mark I'll miss him. Tell yourself to stop worrying about everyone else for once. You deserve peace too." Adam read the letter twice, her hands trembling slightly. The words weren't romantic or inappropriate, yet they carried an undeniable depth. She sat at the kitchen table staring at the paper. Her emotions tangled, sadness, relief, and a quiet ache she couldn't name. When Mark came into the kitchen, she quickly folded the letter and slipped it into a drawer. "You okay?" he asked, noticing her distant look. "Yeah," she said softly. "Just tired." The next few days passed in a haze. She kept busy gardening, organizing closets, calling friends, anything to quiet the noise in her mind. But every time she passed that drawer, she thought about the letter. She didn't reread it, but the words stayed in her memory like a song she couldn't forget. 2 weeks later, Adam sent a group message to the family saying he'd settled in Seattle and found a small apartment. He attached a picture of his new place. Simple, a little messy, but bright. Mark showed it to Emma with a grin. "See? He's already fine." Emma smiled. "I'm glad," she said. And she was, mostly. But at night, when the house grew quiet, her mind replayed everything that had happened over the past month. She wondered if things could have gone differently. Not because she wanted more, but because something inside her had changed. Adam's words had opened her eyes to how numb she'd become in her own life. She wasn't unhappy with Mark, but she had stopped feeling alive one evening. While making dinner, Mark looked up and said, "You've been quiet lately. Everything okay?" Emma hesitated, then nodded. "I've just been thinking about things," she said. "About what?" "About us. About life," she admitted. "It feels like we've both been running on autopilot for a while." Mark frowned. "You're not unhappy, are you?" "No," she said quickly, then softened. "I just miss connection. The little things. Talking without phones or distractions." He looked thoughtful, a bit embarrassed. "You're right. I guess I've been caught up with work too much." "It's not just you," she said gently. "It's both of us. We stopped showing up for each other the way we used to." Mark nodded slowly, then smiled faintly. "Then maybe it's time we fix that." It was a small moment, but it mattered. That night, they had dinner without the TV on for the first time in months. They really talked about small things, funny memories, even future plans. For the first time in a while, Emma felt warmth instead of emptiness. Still, when she went to bed, she thought about Adam's letter again. Not with guilt, but with gratitude. His presence, his honesty, it had reminded her that love and appreciation can exist without breaking boundaries. It had also made her realize how much she still wanted from life. Days turned into weeks, and Emma found herself changing quietly. She started painting again, something she hadn't done in years. She reconnected with her old book club. She and Mark went out for coffee on weekends, something they hadn't done since their early days of marriage. One afternoon while cleaning, she found the letter again. For a moment, she thought about throwing it away. But instead, she placed it inside an old photo album, a silent chapter of her life that didn't need to be erased, only respected. Months later, Adam called during Thanksgiving. Mark put the phone on speaker. "Hey, man," Mark said cheerfully. "We were just talking about you." Adam's voice was light. "Hope you guys are doing well." Emma listened quietly, smiling at the familiar tone. When he asked to speak with her for a second, Mark handed her the phone. "Hey, Emma," Adam said softly. "I just wanted to say thank you again. Things are good here. I'm working, meeting new people. Life feels different." "I'm glad to hear that," she said. "You sound happy." "I'm getting there," he said. "I hope you are too." She looked across the table at Mark, who was busy refilling glasses. "Laughing about something on TV?" "I am," she said honestly. "In my own way." There was a short silence, comfortable and calm. "That's all I wanted to know," Adam said quietly. "Take care of yourself." "You too," she whispered, and the call ended. That night, as she watched snow fall through the window, Emma felt a deep calm. Not everything in life needed a perfect ending. Some moments were meant to teach, to heal, and to help people find themselves again. Adam had been part of her story, not in a forbidden way, but in a meaningful one. She leaned back, sipping her tea, feeling peace for the first time in a long while. Mark came over, kissed her forehead, and said, "I love you, Em." She smiled genuinely. "I love you too." It wasn't a grand ending. It was quiet, real, and right. The kind of ending that doesn't make noise, that stays with you forever. Winter faded into spring, and with it came a quiet renewal in Emma's life. The world outside seemed softer, the kind of soft that made her feel hopeful again. Birds returned to the backyard, the kitchen windows stayed open longer, and laughter began to fill the house in ways it hadn't before. She often thought about how much had changed in such a short time. It wasn't dramatic, but it was real. Mark had noticed too. Their conversations had grown deeper, and they started doing little things together again. Weekend walks, late-night talks, dinners without phones. It felt like they were rediscovering each other piece by piece. But for Emma, it wasn't just about fixing her marriage. It was about finding herself again after years of being lost in routine. One afternoon, while Mark was away for work, Emma sat by the window, sketching in her notebook. Her hands moved slowly, remembering shapes, shadows, and light. She hadn't drawn seriously since college, but now it felt like breathing. As she shaded the outline of a tree, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Adam. Hey, Emma, I hope you're doing okay. I'm visiting town for a few days. Thought I'd let you know. Her heart gave a quiet flutter. She hadn't heard from him in months, though she'd occasionally wondered how he was. The message was short, polite, and respectful. She typed back carefully. I'm glad to hear that. Adam, I hope the city's been treating you well. He replied almost instantly. It has. Maybe we'll run into each other sometime. Take care. Emma smiled faintly. That was all. No emotional weight, no unspoken tension, just a simple human exchange. And yet it reminded her how far she'd come. Once, that kind of message would have stirred confusion and guilt. Now it simply brought peace. 2 days later, Mark mentioned casually that Adam had stopped by his office to say hello. He looks good, Mark said. Said he might drop by for dinner before he leaves if that's okay. Course, Emma said, her voice steady. That Friday, Adam came over for dinner. When he walked in, the atmosphere felt different from before. Easier. Grounded. He greeted Emma warmly, complimenting her cooking, and spent most of the evening catching up with Mark, the air that once carried unspoken emotions now held only comfort. At one point, when Mark went to answer a phone call, Emma and Adam found themselves alone in the kitchen. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was calm. You look happier, Adam said softly. I am, she replied with a gentle smile. Life's been good. I've been painting again. That's great, he said. I remember you used to talk about that. She nodded. It feels like I'm finding parts of myself I'd forgotten. He smiled, not sadly, but sincerely. That's all I ever hoped for you. Mark returned then, laughing about something from work, and the moment passed naturally. They finished dinner, shared stories, and when Adam finally stood to leave, it felt right. At the door, he turned to her and said quietly, Thank you for being kind when I needed it. She nodded. Thank you for reminding me what matters. After he left, Emma stood by the window, watching his car disappear down the street. She didn't feel loss or longing, only gratitude. Life had a strange way of sending people when they were most needed, and Adam had been that reminder. Not of forbidden emotion, but of truth, that love takes many forms. And not all of them are meant to stay. That night when she went to bed, Mark was already half asleep. She turned off the light, lay beside him, and felt an easy contentment. There were no big speeches, no tears, just quiet understanding. Sometimes the heart doesn't need closure in words. It finds it in peace. In the weeks that followed, Emma's art became more colorful, more alive. She joined a local art group and began displaying her work at small community shows. Mark attended her first exhibit, proud and amazed. I can't believe you've been hiding this talent, he said, taking her hand. She smiled. I stopped believing I could do it. That was the problem. He squeezed her hand gently. I'm glad you started believing again. Months later, they took a small trip to the coast, just the two of them. The wind was cool, the sea restless, and for the first time in a long time, Emma felt free. One evening, while watching the sunset, Mark said, You seem lighter lately. She laughed softly. Maybe I finally stopped carrying things that weren't mine to carry. He smiled, not fully understanding, but not needing to. He just wrapped his arm around her shoulders and said, I like this version of you. As the sky turned orange and pink, Emma closed her eyes and let the breeze touch her face. Life wasn't perfect. It never would be, but it was beautiful in its quiet balance. The chaos of the past year had led her here to this peace. And she wouldn't trade it for anything. When they returned home, she found an old box of photos while cleaning. Inside were pictures from her early years with Mark young, hopeful, laughing at nothing. She realized then how easy it had been to forget that kind of joy. She decided to frame one of the photos and place it in the kitchen. It became a reminder that love wasn't just about passion or excitement. It was about choosing each other again and again through every storm. Weeks later, Adam sent a postcard. Just a simple message from Seattle, a picture of the waterfront, and a note on the back. Life's calm. Hope yours is too. She smiled and placed it in her art journal. It didn't mean anything more than kindness, and that was enough. Some people were meant to cross paths to wake up something sleeping inside us, and then they moved on, leaving us changed for the better. Emma looked around her quiet home that evening. Mark was outside, trimming the hedges. The scent of fresh coffee filled the air. The sun spilled through the curtains. Everything felt complete. She realized then that the story wasn't about Adam, or temptation, or regret. It was about rediscovery of love, of self, of peace. And as she sat at her kitchen table, the same one where everything had once felt uncertain, she smiled. Sometimes, life gives you moments that shake your soul, not to break it, but to wake it up. And that's exactly what had happened. She whispered to herself, "Thank you for everything." And for the first time in years, she truly meant it.